Thank you, Dr. Vehviläinen, and thank you for being here so early in the morning. A warm welcome to my lecture recital, which I would like to introduce with some images that, since we're speaking about boundaries, might stir some reflections on the idea of boundaries. The slides are not moving. Sorry. So, thank you very much. I'm a viola player, so I really don't know these kind of things. Anyways, boundaries and images. This is, for instance, how the state borders between Saharan countries look like on a map. And this is how they look like in reality, for the most. Next picture. This is the separate components of a phenomenon that we normally perceive as a whole, namely white light. And lastly, moving on to musical boundaries. This is a normal sight in a record shop nowadays. That's shelves full of CDs, labeled, divided according to genre or other categorization. But we must ask ourselves, where is this music ultimately perceived, recognized maybe, and hopefully ultimately enjoyed? Right here in the unifying mind of the listener. So I think that boundaries are lines that we might construct to orientate ourselves in the vast otherness that seemingly surrounds us. But are these boundaries real, or are they imagined? Or are they maybe a little bit of both? And more importantly, are we so distinctly separated from this vast otherness that seemingly surrounds us? My artistic research project is entitled Postcard Travels, Composing at the Crossroads, and it studies specific strands of Nordic folk music and mixes them with other genres like Western art music, elements of Indian rhythms, as we will shortly see, and even progressive metal. And the research itself feeds on the findings on several fields like musicology, ethnomusicology, music theory, and several strands of performance practice, such as early music performance practice or folk and contemporary music performance practice. The point is that I try not to ignore the boundaries between these disciplines. On the contrary, I try to zoom into them, to explore them. And the closer I look, the more I realize that they're not really sharp, definite lines. For instance, if I magnify this pencil marking, I obtain this. And this is a realization because I don't see them as lines, as dividing lines anymore. I see them as areas. So a boundary for me has become an area where different identities might dissolve into one another. So I try to explore the intersections between paths. And I actually decide to go into those interstitial spaces. I try to dwell there and to express what I see artistically. In a sense, I am at the crossroads, but I try to compose the crossroads in form of hybrid, we could say, compositions that in a way become my temporary itinerant musical homes. How does all this philosophy become actual music? This is why I'm here today. In order to answer this question, I would like to use my last doctoral piece as a case study. The piece is entitled Stringar. It is a string quartet, and it's based on the folk repertoire for the beautiful Hardanger fiddle. Each of the quartet's movements is based on a local variant of a Norwegian folk tune dance type, which is called Springar. And what I will do now, I will hopefully briefly introduce every movement, and then I will play the full execution of the piece, of the movement. Taken from the live premiere happened 1 year ago, roughly, on behalf of the string quartet Metaphor, a stellar Finnish string quartet. By the way, the piece is included in a CD. And by, I swear, a very unintended coincidence, the public release date of the CD is today. Thank you very much. I swear this was not intended. I promise that was not intentional. It's slightly less unintentional the fact that I have the CDs here with me today. So in case you want to buy them, you're very free to do so. But never mind that. Let's now start with the first movement of my piece, namely udelt takt. Generally speaking, springers are tunes that display a triple time, so a triple meter. They go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and so on. However, this is not true for all of them, because the udelt takt springers, or the springers with an undivided beat, they display bouncy rhythms that go 1, 1, 1, 1. It's like boing, 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 like jumping on the spot, more or less. Let's hear an example. There's no clear metrical periodicity here. So it's as if those orange blocks are at the same time the pulse and the meter and the metrical unity. So you can actually group these blocks into sequences of any length, like, for example, 2, 3, 4, or even bigger groups, if your perception tells you so, 5 or 7. And the absence of periodicity becomes even more evident if we take a look at the steps of the dancers. Change of scenery now. Odd sequences of rhythmic units, irregular sequences, are also common in a genre that I really like and that I've mentioned already, namely progressive metal. Let's hear an example by the band Dream Theater, where they use a sequence of different time signatures, generally weird, odd, uncommon time signatures, one after the other. And I suppose the sensation that we get from that is an element of surprise. It's like we are walking on a metrical ground that keeps moving under our feet. The same genre of progressive metal abounds in another level of rhythmic or metric complication, polyrhythms and polymetries, namely, very briefly said, we could define them as the juxtaposition of several or two or more metrical or rhythmical layers which are not aligned. They create a tension between each other. For example, let's hear an example by the Swedish band Meshuggah, not for the faint-hearted, as you can see. And actually, I apologize, brace yourselves, because the next couple of examples are going to display a rather aggressive sound. Anyways, try to figure out what the pulse is, what the meter, mainly what the pulse is in the next example. I just love it. So what happens here, it's called metrical ambiguity. So we're fooled at the beginning because we think that the pulse and the meter go tak 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 ba 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 ba. But then when the second layer comes in 4/4, our metrical perception is completely displaced. And the sensation of metrical ambiguity and rhythmical complexity is also very, very common in yet another genre that I used for my own piece. And I'm talking about the Southern Indian art of konnakol. It's a sort of vocal percussion. There's not much time now to give you too many details about it, but I would like to give you an appetizer, a taste of the very complex rhythmical structures that I simply stole from them, simplified, and used in my own piece. One of these sequences of structures is pretty cool because it presents a pattern that is repeated several times, and every time it's repeated, it shrinks until there's almost nothing left. So, summarizing words, uneven structures, rhythmic dissonance, metrical ambiguity, and the sensation of several rhythmical or metrical layers happening, unfolding at the same time. Please keep this concept and sensation in mind as we dive head on to into the groove of my own piece, Vītols Takt. I hope you enjoy it. let's move on to the second movement. In our common conception of the musical bar, all beats are born equal, meaning that they are equally spaced within the musical bar, the measure. However, this doesn't really seem to be, the case for springers that come from a special region in Norway called Telemark. Hence, they're called telespringers. Let's take this standard bar in 3/4, for example, and let's ideally slide the borders between the beats slightly to the left or slightly to the right. For example, like this. If I want to keep the overall length of the bar intact, and for example, if I want to extend the first beat and keep the second beat as it is, I will have to shrink the third beat. So I will create what is normally called an asymmetrical meter, as opposed to the symmetrical meters where the beats are all the same. They occupy the same space in the bar. So an asymmetrical meter like this doesn't really go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. It goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, long, medium, short, long, medium, short, long, medium, short. So the trick here is that the fiddler is applying asymmetry, so he's differentiating beat length within the bars, not in the same way in every bar. So he changes the beat ratio, the beat size every time. And it's intentional, it's not random. So it responds to instances of the moment, like the phraseological intentions, the musical intentions, also the technical difficulties. So in other words, there is a high level of rhythmic flexibility that the fiddler applies in their own playing. And this is the reason why in my own telespringar movement, I decided to convey an idea of time as phenomenon rather than of a grid like it was, for example, in the previous movement. So time becomes something that can be molded and shaped according to your needs, like the melting clocks in Dali's painting. And I realized this in the score, for example, with the use of unmeasured bars or the semi-improvised treatment of rhythmic patterns conveyed through the unconventional box notation. So, well, without further ado, here is how the concept of flexible rhythms unfolds in my own telespringar composition. Okay, we're approaching the end, I promise, because this is the third and last movement of the quartet. And let's leave rhythm aside for 1 second. And I would like to focus on the character of the tunes from the Valdres region of Norway that give the movement its title. Some of the Valdres springas are said to possess suggestive powers. These are tunes that may hypnotize you. Traditionally, they had hypnotic power, almost trance-like. And their name is dawn tunes, or grålysingene in Norwegian. And this is because they have a connection with those hours that sit right at the border between night and day. The tunes are featured in a written account by Swedish folk collector Einar Övergaard from the early 1900s, where he describes a folk dance party that happens throughout the whole night. And the formal architecture of my own piece is entirely based on this description, which, even if it's a bit long, I would like to read for you, or rather with you, before we listen to my piece. So imagine the scene. There's a farmhouse. It's late at night. We are on a mountain. There has probably been a lot of food, a lot of dancing, and a lot of alcohol as well. So people are positively almost drunk, but let's say tired, and some of them are even sleeping or drowsing off. But then, as the first light from the east announces the new day, the sound of the fiddler tuning his strings spreads through the hall. He strikes a fairy-like chord, and the tired guests shake off their sleepiness with a start. They recognize those tones. The dawn tune is coming. The fiddler begins to play. The strange melody electrifies everyone. Nobody can sit still. Not the old, not the young. Everyone must now come forward and join. Never has the dance had such life as now. The playing grows more and more intense. Suddenly, a loud cry of joy bursts forth from the Valdrisian fiddler. He stamps his foot strongly on the floor. Dust clouds float towards the ceiling. Through their veil and the tobacco smoke, in the half-dimmed light of a lamp, one can see the spirited silhouettes moving in a swirling dance. The fiddler then falls silent. The wild, loud energy that had reigned earlier, summoned by the dawn tune, has now settled down. One after the other, the guests drag themselves home, and the dance is over. Walter Spring articulates the suggestive powers of these tunes through the narrative told by several Springer melodies that I wrote for the piece. I tried to expand the rhythmic and harmonic characteristics of the original traditional tunes that I used as modals, because I wanted to create an arch of tension, an arch of musical energy that starts from silence and to silence returns. And with this, I would like to thank you for bearing with me in this very long attempt to offer you a glimpse on how composition has helped me understand boundaries better, and to use them to my advantage in the construction of that temporary itinerant musical home that for me is my quartet Stringa. I think that boundaries, definitions, labels are maybe imaginary, but they are very useful in order to map the territory upon which we are. They are useful models of reality, not to be confused with reality itself. And this, I think, is, especially now, more important than ever. Thank you very much. Sorry, it's not over. I would like to play the last movement, but I think I messed up something. So let me just go back. And back. Yes.
very much. I'm really enchanted with your music, and I'm very convinced with your approach. It's so essential today, this fusion of styles in the situation of globalization. Yes, and you have concentrated today your lecture regarding your quartet, but maybe you can tell a little bit more about your pieces. What kind of folk elements have you used in other pieces, or maybe your further plans? Maybe you are working on some work now, because this fusion, what you have shown, it was really fantastic. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
You are very welcome, and I'm very happy to be able to share music and thoughts and feelings with human beings.
Yes, and it's freedom, you see.
Yeah.
You can extend the boundaries, and everybody will understand.
Yeah. That's basically
music
a part.
Goes directly to your heart, because everybody we have our archetypes inside.
Yeah.
And,
I'm very glad to hear that, because I just can't help it. You know, I am a mixed person. Maybe that's not really English, is it? But, I mean, I have mixed backgrounds. So I am a classical musician, but I also love early music, baroque music. As you might have noticed, I like progressive metal and other types of music. So for me, it's almost inevitable, even if I don't want it. Whenever I do something, when I perform on the viola, I'm a viola player, or when I do my research, or when I write my own arrangements and music, this comes through. To answer your question, I could maybe talk very, very briefly, I promise, about the other half of the CD. So Stringer is one part, is one half of the recording. The other half is something that I play myself on the hardanger fiddle, so on the hardingfele, the Norwegian fiddle, which has this beautiful resonance thanks to the sympathetic strings. And it's a very similar concept to the one of Stringer, but the source is different. I chose another type of tunes from Norway. And for example, there I used a lot more early music influences. But once again, almost without noticing it. So the first movement, for example, is a long toccata style sort of movement. And even if I didn't really mean it, it also embedded elements from the alap, so the Oriental, Indian, but also Middle Eastern type of improvisation that goes before the pieces. So it's a kind of a strange mixture between the two. The other movements have fierce rhythmical tensions, as we saw here. Especially the second one is full of metrical ambiguity. So I would say maybe rhythm and meter for me, at least right now, are very important. I really like it. For the future, I should start working on a piece that has been commissioned for viola da gamba and bass clarinet for a duo that I know very well from Germany. And I have absolutely no idea what it's going to be like, but probably something also regarding meter. I would like to explore the intricacies of Indian music a bit more. So maybe that's what lies ahead in my next couple of months, 2 or 3 months.
Wow. Thank you very much. Really, I could perceive also some elements, some futures from Renaissance music, especially how do you build the form of piece, how do you develop the material, and of course similarities of this continuality, what's maybe for Eastern music there also is here. And so it's so interesting. So
as you very well said, there's a lot of models, or maybe they're almost unconscious, but I apply whatever I heard for many, many years during my career as a baroque viola player. You know, it just sticks with you. So it's almost inevitable that whenever you pour it out, it bears some colors of the stuff that you've been absorbing. So yes, I have the tendency to develop things in I don't even know if it makes sense, but in a baroque way, so not in a very avant-garde or modernistic way, which is something that I would like to explore, for example, because it's not currently so much part of my palette, but it's a fantastic tool to have. So I'm open to suggestions and listenings and stuff. I need to feed myself first, and then I process the influences, and then somehow they come out.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I know that currently you have issued your CDs, and
Yes.
There are some.
It's out. It's right there in my backpack, by the way. And there's 7 tracks, sorry, Stringa and a Norwegian suite for solo harmonica fiddle. It's part of my studies, actually. This is my last doctoral artistic component before the discussion of the thesis.
So, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and it's possible to listen also in Spotify? And
yes, it's out now. I will maybe post something on Facebook, but you can find it on Spotify, iTunes, and if there's anything else I'm not aware of, please let me know.
Thank you very much, and we are waiting for your further projects. And so maybe some questions.
Thank you, Krishna, so much for this very important presentation, and congratulations about the composition. It was fantastic. I think your presentation was really important, and we understand by it that artistic research is really important. You have spent a lot of time to understand the boundaries. And we have been talking about a lot in artistic research about crossover and how important it is to go beyond your comfort zone and find different kind of things. And at the same time, in university politics, it usually happens that people get defensive when they need to go away from the comfort zones, and that is understandable. So my point is that in your presentation, the key concept is the softness and gentleness and understanding to try to understand why people are in the why these boundaries are built and what is inside them. It's different thing to understand it via research than forcing people to unify. This is what I have been thinking about for decades, because it has been the same situation between different music genres and of course between different art genres, because we have, like for instance, Uni Arts Helsinki. So we are discussing about the same things again, but it's about the approach you choose when you succeed, and this is one really good example of succeeding. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your praise. Thanks.
Some more questions, maybe? Yeah, here. Excuse me.
Hi. Thank you for your amazing presentation on the piece. Very nice. So you mainly focused on musical parameters like rhythm and metric. I was wondering if you have done any type of research. Maybe it's kind of like a big question to ask, but have you done any other approach to Norwegian music apart from rhythm, for example, tuning systems or harmonic systems, or any type of instrumental articulation, or sort of opening up the parameters apart from rhythm? Yeah.
Thank you for the very, very good question. The answer is yes. There's other aspects of Hardingfele life that are definitely emerging in the pieces. One, for example, that I didn't talk about because there wasn't time, is the aspect of tuning, which is so important in Hardingfele. Hardingfele has more than 20 types of tuning, traditionally speaking, and you can actually invent your own. In fact, in the piece that I recorded, there's one traditional tuning called Gorlaus. It's from bottom to top, F, D, A, E. But I adapted a traditional tuning to my own needs for the other two movements, which is, F, D, F, E. So it's there's no other tune than my own piece with that tuning. So, of course, as you know, every tuning brings out different characteristics, different resonances, and different colors of the instrument. And this is key in Hardingfele playing, because the tune, it works like this: the tune, the tuning, and the character of the tune, they work as a feedback mechanism. They feed each other, and they create incredibly vivid musical images, like these dawn tunes, for example. There's my Hardingfele piece is full of rammeslots. Rammeslots are very powerful tune from Setesdal. If you live in Norway, more or less, you know where it is, so it's southwest. And they are said to have even more suggestive and magical powers. They have a huge history that dates back to the Middle Ages. So, once again, boundaries between the narrative, the character, and the technicalities of the instrument is what fascinates me a lot. There's of course, the melodic contour. I took that into consideration, of course. And the structuring. This is one, maybe we can talk about it later in private because it would take too much time, but very briefly, again in that tune and again in the rameslots or rameslogs, these tunes are particular because you start with a little motif, like maybe even less than 1 bar, even shorter than 1 bar, and you repeat it. Then you start micro variations. So you vary a tiny detail, and you repeat it with the detail, and you vary more and more until it becomes something else. And you repeat the procedure. So it's actually like you plant a seed, and then the seed becomes a little plant, and then a branch, another branch, leaves. So the tune grows out of itself. Yeah, hope that sort of sheds light.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Maybe some more questions? Oh, there is one. Yeah.
More a comment than a question, and actually a public acknowledgement. So we know each other. We are in the folk, in the same department, in the same university. You are coming to the end of your research, but what people here might not know is that this is a very tiny part of your doctoral, and that there are at least 2 more outputs, 2 more artistic components, a concert in Finland, a concert in Sweden. You just chose to explore more. There's another one more.
That's 5. Yes. Okay.
Yes, and I just would like to know that I just would like to say that it's always very emotional for me to hear your music and your work since the very first Finnish concert, the Finnish concert that I remember saying thank you for doing this, because you have a singular talent of being able to communicate very complex subjects in a very simple way, and because you speak several musical languages, you can really unite the musicians, from the self-taught folk musician to the highly advanced music theory that the self-taught folk musician might be practicing, but not knowing that he's practicing it and not knowing how to explain it. So I'll just say again, thank you, Krishna, for doing for this service that you are doing to the music field.
Thank you, Gonzalo.